Wish I could be there in person. We looked into it. It seemed like a bit of trouble. So getting there from the US. So, but that said, I'm sure it's a fantastic meet, and I hope that this can be a useful information to you all. I know that Maxime and Olga have given their perspectives on RGB, and they're incredible, fantastic, wonderful builders, but they're not end users of the technology. And well, kind of they are. They'll build applications. They do. But we're like the third party, right? Like we're more like you guys. Like what you'll be doing. So maybe getting our perspective might be useful for you. Just some background on myself first. My name's Hunter Beast. I go by Nim. That's my name. And I used to be a JS dev, but I went to Rust around 5 years ago. I started out with shitcoinery. A lot of Bitcoiners did. And but I've been Bitcoin only since not too long ago, but I got orange pilled around just a couple of few years ago, and I really dedicated more and more towards becoming a bit of a Bitcoin maxi, especially with as I've delved more into RGB. I joined DIBA, which I'll go into further in the presentation, in February 2022, and we work very closely with the RGB team. And so now let's get into it. The term RGB stands for red, green, and blue, or actually it also could stand for really good for Bitcoin, but it's a reference to colored coins, and they're an alternate unit of account. OmniLayer used to be is kind of like an old kind of historical at this point color coin protocol that Tether was originally issued on. The original Tether issuance was not on an ERC20. It was on Bitcoin itself. And it was officially discontinued just this year in favor of RGB. And according to Jimmy Song, the original color coins movement, effort, that sort of stuff, it failed for a few reasons. Failed to catch on compared to ERC20 just because there wasn't enough cooperation and standardization. There wasn't, like a huge marketing budget that they could apply. They didn't, pre-mine 72 million ETH, so they I guess they didn't have that luxury. So and then the market just wasn't ready. They were a little before their time. Now, why did they want shitcoins on Bitcoin? Well, people want them. Like, people just really want them. Like, it's kind of weird. But we live in a world of shitcoins. There's food, furniture, houses, right? Like the food you eat, the furniture you sit on, the houses you live in, those are all things that you could you could instead use your money to buy Bitcoin, but instead you're using it to buy those things. And in many ways, like Bitcoiners, sarcastically refer to these things as shitcoins, but in some ways, they could be represented by shitcoins. And in order to do that, you could create receipts. Receipts are really actually valuable contracts for in how we conduct our daily business. And also there's potential applications for altruism with shitcoins, like just accreditation and provenance, things like that, and contracts without authorities. That actually is a really powerful thing once you really think about it. But ideally, we can do all these things with doing the least disruption to the time chain, and with the lowest amount of fees, and the most amount of privacy, and the most streamlined way as possible. So, what is RGB? It's a generalized smart contract protocol. It keeps contract data off chain, so that means that it uses client side validation, which is essentially executes the contracts within the wallets themselves. And then contract state is sharded amongst contract owners, which means that as users interact with the protocol, as they make use of, say, tokens, they'll create separate transaction histories that don't really intersect unless really they if Alice never transfers tokens to Bob, then but instead she transfers tokens to Carol, then, and Carol never transfers her tokens to Bob, then they'll never know that the other existed, and this is a good scaling mechanism. And these are bearer contracts, so that you actually have to have the data for them in your wallet. And there's complications for that, and we'll go into that in a little bit. But there's also strong privacy that you get from this, because strong privacy characteristics, because you're essentially keeping a lot of that data off chain, and basically all of the important data off chain. But it's still secured by Bitcoin, and there's no other blockchain needed, no other fee token than Sats. UTXOs. Now, this might be going into a little of the weeds, but it's important to understand them. And hopefully, if there's one thing that you can take away from this presentation, is just a better understanding of what a UTXO is. They are unspent transaction outputs. So let's walk through that. So unspent can only be spent once, right? We can't double spend in Bitcoin. That's a very important thing. And it is a transaction, which means that it's atomic. It either happens or it doesn't. It is a single, indivisible unit that cannot, it cannot happen in a fraction of itself. And then it is an output. And so it can be used as an input, but it is an output, and it is not like an accounts-based system like EVM. So it uses this input output system that I'll kind of give some screenshots of later in the presentation. So single-use seals. Single-use seals use UTXOs, and they don't need UTXOs, but they use them. And the UTXO proves several things: that there's a single unique state, that no other UTXO that's the same, because it has the same transaction ID, the same position, especially after transfer. That means that somebody can't lie about having said that, oh, actually I meant a different UTXO. This state can be spent by its owner. That generally is the case, that a UTXO can be spent, and there's a sort of separation of ownership and state because of this. This state is valid. That's another thing that it proves. That it can also prove that it hasn't been double spent. This sort of forms a single-use seal. It's sort of like a seal that can only be used once, closed once, and and this creates a cryptographic commitment that prevents inflation and helps with the sharding mechanism that I described earlier. And it also helps with timestamping and ordering of transactions, which is also quite important when you're trying to determine, who owns what. Now, privacy is really good in this situation because of that, because of client-side validation. Because it's RGB data is defined by clients. It's defined and held by and transmitted, but none of it goes on chain. Contracts, beneficiaries, participants, amounts, invoices, none of that goes on chain. So, and just to give you an example of what actually does go on chain, this is an example of an RGB transfer transaction. And what it does is it pulled in some Bitcoin to pay for fees, and it had a dust output over here. On the top left, it has a dust output. The bottom left, it has some Bitcoin it's pulling in from the wallet to pay for fees. And then on the right, it's creating two new Taproot transactions. You know they're Taproot because they're TB1P instead of TB1Q or BC1Q if you're on mainnet. And this is the change output on the upper right, and this is the dust output on the lower right. And what you might notice is that there is nothing really unique about any of these outputs or inputs or anything about this transaction that gives you any indication that this is not a monetary transaction, that there's any other, tokens or contract shenanigans associated with it, which is a really special thing. Now, token metadata. Token metadata is something that is specified in the contract. This is for RGB20. RGB20 is a protocol. It's contract for the protocol, and it is for fungible tokens. And it allows you to specify, the name, the supply, and the precision in kind of like a global state. And then it's issued against a UTXO, which is owned state. It creates whenever you're going to do a transfer, you'll generate a consignment, which is a change in the ownership of a contract. And you'll create, you'll go through kind of like a series of steps, though at least the wallet will, there'll be some, depending on the wallet and how it's designed, there'll also be some user interaction. So your wallet will create a blinded UTXO, which, basically obscures your actual UTXO and by creating a blinding factor. And is there's another number added to your UTXO, and it'll then put that into an invoice, omitting the blinding factor, and then the invoice will be used to create a transfer consignment from the peer, and to the peer, and the peer will relay the transaction, and then and then you will accept the consignment once they have signed it. And finally, it'll go into this thing called a stash, which is then serialized using a strict encoding into a stock. And that's stored in the wallet. Now, RGB21 is similar to RGB20, and they both use this thing called an RGB30 or LNPBP31 standard lib. And just to be clear, these LNPBP and RGB20 standards, these are standards, right? These are it's very important that we standardize things, that we're not all kind of we're not all doing the same thing and making the same mistakes that we did with the original color coin stuff. So it's very important that we have this LNPBP Standards Association gathering all these standards and making sure that everything's developed in a uniform and repeatable way. And so this is a unique digital asset instead of a non-inflatable asset or a fungible asset, which is RGB20, and it's the equivalent of just one of one. So supply of one, precision of zero. You can have attachments like images, and you can have a URI, and it'll go into the transfer consignment or actually a country consignment as well, and the limit is 16 megabytes, which can be transferred off chain. To give you an idea of the power that you can get from an RGB20 or RGB21, I should say, transaction. Imagine this RGB21 on the lower left here from the seller is a receipt for something that this merchant. This merchant, this seller, he's selling some grain, and he has some specific amount of grain. Grain is a thing that we've always been selling and buying since time immemorial. So some of our oldest clay tablets have grain accounting, and so why should Bitcoin be any different? The most modern, most exciting technology on Bitcoin, we're just going to use it for grain. And so let's see. What's interesting is that when in this single atomic swap transaction, it's a single transaction, but you're including inputs from both the buyer and the seller. And the buyer puts an input for the amount of Bitcoin that they're using to buy the grain, and it goes to the seller. And then the seller spends the UTXO that they have as an input to this transaction that has that has the cryptographic commitment for the RGB21 in RGB21 asset that corresponds to the grain shipment. And then this then kind of teleports to this buyer UTXO, and this happens off chain. This kind of transfer over here, this dashed line, that both of these dashed lines actually happen off chain. And so any change that this seller had, like any other, invoices or receipts that they had on their output that are not related to the buyer UTXO, that they're not transferring, will go to a new dest output that they'll be creating in this transaction, and they'll commit to those in there. But then the buyer gets this transfer, and this can actually go to a number of different buyers, not just one. And so that's actually a really interesting scaling technique where a single transaction can go to a number of different buyers. So that's kind of cool. And what's interesting is that these men have guns. And traditionally, a transaction like this would be enforced through violence or the threat of violence, right? But since this is an atomic swap enforced through a blockchain or a time chain, then we actually don't need the threat of force, because there's no risk of one side walking out on the other. So that's an incredibly valuable innovation that we could bring to civilization. We're going to skip the next few slides because they are actually quite technical, and we're just going to go into DIBA. And now DIBA, we're a marketplace for digital assets, and we focus mostly on RGB21 and also physical to digital assets. And we also make a wallet. This wallet, it's called BitMask. It's a non-custodial Bitcoin taproot wallet, which has its addresses start with BC1P, at least on mainnet. And it is a utility wallet. It's layer 1 only for now, at least for RGB, it's for layer 1 only, though it does support custodial lightning for payments. And it supports usernames, NIP5ID for Nostr enthusiasts, and it has some other neat stuff. So it does not support Prime yet, but it may be sometime soon. We won't go into Prime in this. It's actually quite complex. But we use this library that we made called BitMask Core, and it's made in Rust, and it has a little bit of TypeScript glue here that you can use to glue into your project. And it makes use of the Bitcoin dev kit, the PayJoin dev kit, the Nostr dev kit. No Lightning dev kit yet, but we do use LND Hub X, DZ swaps, Carbonado, and RGB. You may not have heard of Carbonado. We'll get into that in a few slides. And the wallet actually creates its keys in a very technical way. We'll skip this slide. Now, Carbonado. What is Carbonado? This is so we thought so first of all, a Carbonado is a kind of black diamond. It's an actual real thing. And we thought a black diamond was a fantastic way to make an analogy for, like unique, encrypted data. It's encrypted by default, highly durable data storage format that can be used for decentralized storage. So you can provide someone with this with your precious data, and you can then put a camera on it and kind of over time take little snapshots of it. And instead of needing to take custody of the diamond, the entire thing all over again, you can actually just take little snapshots of it and you can be sure that the counterparty is holding the rest of it. And it uses this thing called stream verification, which on the bottom here is kind of like a demonstration of how, like, you can take small segments of the file, like say 1 kilobytes. These little lines are 1 kilobytes each, maybe not to scale. And you have 1 terabyte, but that, like, you could take 1 kilobyte from here, kilobyte from here, kilobyte from here, to prove that that if they can provide the correct 1 kilobyte of data for this slice here, then it's very likely that the rest of it is the correct data, because you can then ask for another random set of slices of data in the next challenge period. Let's call it that. And how do we use Carbonato in BitMask? Well, we actually create a hex secret key that we actually also use for Nostr, but we use it for both Nostr and Carbonato, and it encodes the stock, which I mentioned earlier, which is used to store RGB contracts. Which is in memory. It's serverless, end-to-end encrypted, stored on multiple servers, and it uses these things called CRDTs, which are conflict-free replicated data types that allows it to automatically merge data across multiple sources into a single consistent state. We're also in the future, we're going to be implementing some lightning swaps, some RGB swaps, transfer batching. These are all kind of things that we're looking to implement in RGB 0.7, BitMask 0.7. And we also want to make sure that it's compatible with the Iris wallet, which is another RGB wallet out there. And we at some point, we're going to implement Nostr contacts, Nostr Wallet Connect. BIP21 will be really nice to have, which is like basically like URLs for Bitcoin. You probably have used these quite a bit with like QR codes and such. WebBTC, WebLN, and maybe even WebRGB standards. And maybe teleburning ordinals inscriptions. So maybe some ordinals compatibility. And that's actually an outdated figure, 1111, unfortunately. We overshot that launch date, but for good reasons, for very good reasons. Let's just say that we need to make sure, very, very darn sure, that RGB is very ready for production use. And we're hoping that it should be, we'll have everything maybe ready. I really shouldn't put a time out on it, but hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have something presentable. And looking to the future, there's some, really exciting stuff for scaling Bitcoin. One question in the back of people's minds might be like, how do we make this technology scale to serve all the billions of people in the world who might want to make use of it? And Prime is one possibility for that. It's good for high volume transactions that aren't necessarily going to stick around for a while. So maybe, markets. And Radiant is useful for basically putting, basic collateralizing Bitcoin into tokenized Bitcoin on from layer 1 to like essentially layer 2, which can then be put onto Prime and scaled that way. And it can be, and both of these require no changes to Bitcoin, which is crucial. And Abraxas is also an alternate layer 1, similar to Prime, but it solves some things in a slightly different way, and it's actually really, how would you say? It's much better for, say, NFTs or UDAs, or what we call unique digital assets. It's really good for like things that are longer term, longer lived than what you might use with Prime. And so these are both Prime and Abraxas are both ways to scale Bitcoin transactions in different ways, and they're very complementary. So the developer ecosystem for BitMask is actually quite. We like to think it's quite vibrant. We have lots of Rust. We have some Kotlin, and we have some TypeScript, and we have some Python, and we have a package on NPM. And so there's multiple organizations. RGB Tools is a contributor, the RGB working group, and of course DIBA. For more research to learn about RGB, there's some links here. You can either like take a photo of this right now, or I will provide the slides on my Twitter and elsewhere, and so make sure I'll make sure that everybody can have access to these, and anybody who's curious. And that's about it. You can go and follow me on X or Twitter, and on GitHub, and talk to me on Telegram. I'm on Nostr as well.
Now we have some time for questions. The first question for me is where everything is stored. Yeah, RGB contract stored, and the assets are stored. It's centralized, decentralized. It's actually Carbonado right now, or maybe it's just simple IPFS or something like this.
Right. So we use Carbonado to encode the files, and then we store it on multiple servers. So it is decentralized by the virtue of kind of similar to how a Nostr wallet or client, a Nostr client will connect to multiple relays, and it'll broadcast your messages to multiple relays. It will like the wallet can connect to multiple Carbonado nodes and put your files on those. And then over time, at some point, we haven't built this functionality yet, but we have built to support this functionality. We've designed it and architected from the beginning so that we will be able to do this with all files that we've encoded in Carbonado so far. Is the capability to put these files on remote servers and decentralize them, and make sure that other people are storing your data in a geographically redundant manner.
Okay, great. So it's worked in production environment, yes, but now it's limited by a few servers, on your hosts, yeah.
Correct, and those are provided by Hut 8. Actually, we're in a partnership with them, but we're also looking to partner with other miners, and hopefully, as we expand the network and the project grows more mature, we'll be able to have a more kind of decentralized marketplace for storage, and it'll all be powered by Lightning and paid for in Lightning Sats.
Yeah. Great. One more question from me. If I'm not mistaken, I read about your bio, and you worked with ordinals, yes, or I'm mistaken, and then moved to DIBA. Is this correct? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did some work with ordinals, and I'd been following that project quite closely since its inception. I thought it was quite interesting, from a developer's perspective. It was written in Rust, the indexer, and so I knew how to contribute to it, and I made some contributions to it in the past. But I've since focused 100% of my energy towards the RGB ecosystem.
And why you finally decided to move from ordinals to RGB? Why didn't you just continue to issue ordinals or work with this ecosystem?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because RGB is some of the most exciting, interesting, challenging tech to work on in Bitcoin right now. It is the hot shit right now, I have to say. And so it's I wouldn't work on anything else. Even people think inscriptions or ordinals are cool. Well, they haven't even seen a fraction of what RGB can do. So
if I understand correctly, the contracts should be stored on some kind of nodes like XMPP have. So what would be motivation for those guys who are supporting those nodes, like you mentioned, to support it because it's kind of not as cost efficient for them, like to spend a time and money to support the server with all those contracts, which will take, I assume, if it will become something rather popular, will take a lot of volume on these machines.
Yeah, so they'll be paid with Lightning sats. So like if you have excess storage capacity, you want to monetize that, then you'll want to and you want to make Bitcoin and not some shitcoin, then you will want to use Carbonado. And Carbonado has the unique capability to verify remotely without needing to download the entire file over again.
Hey, Hunter. First, yes, we agree with you about the people want shitcoins, people love shitcoins, people hold shitcoin. Okay, my question is BitMask. It's mean like create unique digital assets for free. Why for free? It's mean like this off chain, or why free? Who will pay cost?
Yeah, so it is off-chain. And so one thing you do need to do is you need to create dust UTXOs, which costs about, at present fee rates, I've seen people pay maybe $10 or $20 worth of Bitcoin to make the dust UTXOs. But once they have that, then they can mint just about as many contracts as they want against those dust UTXOs as they want. And then that contract data will be encoded into Carbonado format and stored on our servers. And at some point, we will charge for that beyond a certain amount. So that's kind of our business model. One of the ways we intend to generate revenue.
Thank you very much. From me, I want to appreciate Hunter, because today is Thanksgiving Day, working Thanksgiving Day for Hunter. So thank you very much once again. We will very glad to see you on our meetup.